We are back with the Week in Review. A special good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning in today, Saturday, the 15th of May, 2021. My name is Jessie Leonce. I'm joined by my colleague, Lucia Joseph, and we will be bringing you the details of the week that was. We also have a special interview in store for you this morning. We do hope that you stay tuned for that for the duration of this morning's program. Good morning, Lisa.
Hi, good morning, Jessie. I could see that we were like-minded this morning, walking in. I was like, oh, look. So, yes, absolutely. Great minds. Good morning to you. Good morning to St. Lucia. And of course, we're coming off what I believe to be an exciting time for us with our COVID-19 management. We had, Jessie, the arrival of some 26,000 AstraZeneca doses of the vaccine coming in, and that only helps us towards our achieving the goal of herd immunity. So we'll be discussing that along with other matters with our special guest, and I think I can safely say now, Jessie, that the special guest will be the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Alan Chastney. He is in quarantine, having traveled to Miami and New York of last week, and so he will be discussing with us the travels, his experience traveling internationally, and how does St. Lucia match up to what he experienced in terms of the COVID-19 protocols and measures at the ports? And of course, there are many other issues as well we'll be discussing with the Prime Minister. As always, want to remind you that you're joining us live on Facebook as well, so you can post some of the questions that you may have in mind, and we'll be very happy to pose those questions to the Prime Minister as well as we go on through the program. Also want to say good morning to those of you viewing us on DBS television. Thank you so much to our media partner for joining us on this very special Saturday morning.
Absolutely. And Lisa, I mean, more vaccines coming in. It's with the steady flow of residents here in St. Lucia coming in to get their vaccines as well. Even today we have vaccinations
right outside our office, by the way.
Right outside at the VG complex, the VG Sports Complex. If you want to get vaccinated today, you can head on over there. Well, of course, as usual, you could pre-register hmi.govt.lc, and if you're not able to, still come to the complex and let them know that you're interested with your identification card so that they can give you your first jab. If you're coming to get your second jab, make sure you come with the immunization card. So we're definitely seeing, Lisa, that the road to herd immunity, we're making stride, and definitely if you are interested, you can take advantage of the opportunity through this campaign. There's quite a few activities, developments happening in the past week, Lisa. Aside from the donation, we also had the St. Lucia Electricity Services donating essential testing equipment to the Ezra Long Laboratory, and this is the continuation of the private sector stepping in terms of the COVID-19 response here on island. And we've heard very early on the Ezra Long Laboratory indicating that in order to really meet the needs of this virus, the response to this virus, we need to build capacity. So we have a report on the Ezra Long Lab continuing to enhance their COVID-19 testing on island following the donation of this very important testing equipment from Lucia. More in this report from Fernell Neptune.
As part of efforts to aid in St. Lucia's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Lucia recently officially handed over testing equipment to the Ezra Long Lab of the Owen King EO Hospital. The equipment is expected to further strengthen the testing capacity of the Ezra Long Lab. Director of the Ezra Long Lab, Dr. Wayne Felicia, says the equipment is needed and will play a significant part in addressing testing challenges for COVID-19 in St. Lucia.
Persons would remember when we went for our situation during the months of January and February, where results delayed up until 7 days, so even more. With the assistance of the extraction device that Lucia has provided, we've been able to keep to our turnaround time of 24 to 48 hours, which we have been able to maintain through large parts of the month of March, April, and into May.
Managing Director of Lucia, Trevor Luisi, says His organization remains committed to contribute to the national COVID-19 response effort and believes the donation of testing equipment will assist tremendously.
In the last quarter of 2020, we were beginning to see an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases, and we wanted to do all we could to get the equipment here quickly. That is the equipment for which we're doing a symbolic presentation today. Symbolic because the equipment has been in use. Sadly though, not as quickly as we had hoped due to some setup challenges. Nonetheless, we are pleased to have been able to make a contribution to improving the efficiency with which the lab can process PCR samples.
Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belma George expressed gratitude to Lucia for the donation and says this will contribute towards expanding the nation's testing and curbing the COVID-19 virus.
This capacity that we now have, and a lot of the people of St. Lucia who waited long periods for results are now seeing those benefits when within 24 hours you are able to tell if you're positive or negative, to know how to proceed. And it has also supported our contact tracing efforts in making it a lot more efficient and reducing spread. So this really is an invaluable tool in supporting and managing COVID-19.
The donation of the testing equipment from Lucia to the Ezra Long Lab is valued at $114,000 EC dollars. Reporting from the Communications Unit of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, I am Fennel Neptune.
Thank you, Fernell, for that report there on the Ezra Long Lab being able to increase their capacity and reduce the turnover for samples being processed for COVID-19 testing there. So again, also thank you to Lucia for this significant donation.
And as we indicated earlier, it's certainly the sort of partnership that the private sector, how it sees its role in the national fight against COVID-19, being able to help in the management of that. And we're hearing that the piece of equipment is worth well over 100,000 EC dollars. And looking at it, it just looked like strange apparatus. Okay. You wouldn't think that there is such a price tag on it. But this is certainly complementing what the government had done earlier on in the year, in being able to provide and furnish the Ezra Long Lab with the pertinent equipment that it needed in order for it to be able to re-establish the testing time over in terms of being able to give you your 24-hour results. So that piece of equipment is certainly sort of buttressing what was already in place following what the government of St. Lucia had been able to do for the Ezra Long Lab. And of course there's also the human resource element, because we're seeing that the forensic lab is also contributing to testing for the Ezra Long Lab as well. So that definitely is putting St. Lucia more in a better space.
Absolutely. And just to go back to Lucia, it's I have a special appreciation for this sort of targeted response in this charitable gesture. Usually there'll be donations en masse of masks and hand sanitizer and so on, but this is actually dealing with a particular hiccup, I should say, in the COVID-19 response process. So,
and then I think too that it's an absolute tangible, because we will forever be present with COVID. We'll always have to be dealing with COVID. And so even perhaps, even though in achieving herd immunity, and we may in a year or two no longer be required to have all of these PPEs, we will always have need for the testing capacity. We will always need that. And so it's an absolute tangible that is going to go a very long way. Although I did not necessarily hear it from the officials there, but certainly, you know, some of the pieces of equipment can have multiple uses.
Yes.
And so that piece of machinery may well be able to help us further down the line with some other factors. So it's an absolute tangible that Lucia has contributed to the national fight.
Absolutely. We continue on with this morning with word from the Assistant Principal Nursing Officer, who's also the immunization manager. I always like to say she always gets excited when there's talk about vaccination. Ms. Tekla Jean-Baptiste. Take a look, and this is with respect to the arrival of the second batch of the COVID-19 vaccine through the COVAX facility.
The COVAX facility remains committed to equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines to the countries. On Wednesday, May 12, 2021, St. Lucia received 26,400 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine from the COVAX facility through the Pan American Health Organization. This is the second batch of vaccines delivered to St. Lucia through this mechanism, bringing the total to 50,400 doses. St. Lucia expects to receive another batch of vaccines soon. This second tranche of vaccines is welcomed as we work towards ensuring population immunity against COVID-19. St. Lucia began its COVID-19 vaccination program on February 17, 2021. As of May 13, 2021, 25,939 persons, that is 14.2%, have been immunized with the first dose of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, while 16,124, that is 8.7%, persons have been fully vaccinated with 2 doses of the vaccine. The Ministry of Health is pleased with the response, especially during the initial rollout of the campaign. The uptake of the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine continues to increase, but at a slow pace. However, there is satisfactory uptake of the second dose of the vaccine. This demonstrates that citizens understand the benefit of being fully vaccinated and the benefit it affords. The COVID-19 vaccine campaign for the past 3 months has focused on people who had high and medium risk of being infected with COVID-19 and those at risk of developing the severe form of the disease. From last week, the campaign transitioned from the phased approach to targeting everyone 18 years and older. It is important for us to achieve COVID-19 population immunity of 70% or greater to regain some level of economic or population normalcy. As a result, the Ministry of Health, and by extension, the government of St. Lucia, is ramping up its community vaccination outreach with the inclusion of the mobile pop-up vaccination drive from today, Friday 14th, 2021. These pop-up vaccination clinics will be established at various high-traffic sites across the island. Persons are encouraged to continue accessing vaccines at the main vaccination sites as well as the mobile units when it's in their area. While we strive for the 70% or greater population immunity, it is recommended that people continue with the public health measures, including the wearing of masks, adequate hand hygiene, and social distancing to help prevent and control the spread of COVID-19. The Ministry of Health and Wellness will continue to provide updates on the COVID-19 vaccination program.
That was Ms. Tekla Jabatis, the immunization manager overseeing the national COVID-19 vaccination campaign, giving the announcement of an additional 26,400 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, bringing the total number of vaccines that we've got, doses that we've gotten through the COVAX facility, thank God, to 50,400 doses. And she did indicate that the hope is ultimately to have COVID-19 population immunity, or at least of having 70% or greater immunity to regain some level of economic or population normalcy. So that is the effort that is ongoing right now. We heard from the Prime Minister in the Honorable House that the effort is to, by October, have herd immunity to get ourselves back on the up and up. Speaking of which, I just want to give you an update in terms of our COVID-19 cases so far. We got word from the Department of Health and Wellness of 28 new cases, and in terms of recoveries, nine recovered, bringing the total number of active cases on island to 197. You just heard from Ms. Jabatista as well that the importance of continuing to adhere to the protocol. So not because we're making grounds in the COVID-19 response where it pertains to vaccinations that we need to just rest on our laurels and forget about the protocols. We still need to adhere to the basic infection prevention measures to keep the numbers down.
And we need to keep those numbers, as the CMO has indicated.
Absolutely.
The comfortable, not that it is the right, that it's okay, but the health officials will be comfortable to have 50 cases and less.
Double digits.
Right?
Yeah.
So in order for us to be able to really cut back on what the infection rate is here in St. Lucia. But quite exciting, Jessie, as well, is the fact that we now have the mobile COVID-19 unit that has been launched, and this is really going to help us turn a corner with the vaccination program, because many St. Lucians are not able, especially the most vulnerable, our elderly folk, they're not able to come out and go and have access to the various sites. So for a unit to be able to go in some of the more high trafficked areas of the country, or even some of the low trafficked areas of the country, to really get into the sick and shut-in and so forth, the elderly, it's going to really turn a corner for us. And even for workplaces who want to be able to organize vaccination, although a number of establishments have already done this. From the onset, a number of the business houses organized the vaccination for the employees, and the health officials very willingly went in and did so. So the request can always be made, and I believe that the private sector, through the Chamber of Commerce, the discussions are always ongoing as to how that partnership can happen and result in vaccination at the workplaces. Now we're getting set for us to speak with Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chastney. So Jesse, will take a very short break. When we come back, we'll be speaking with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia.
We can win this war. Get vaccinated. We're taking our life back. Get vaccinated. We know what to do. Get vaccinated. COVID-19 we won't lose to you. Oh no. Take 2 doses. Take our life back. Time for a brand new day. Take 2 doses. Take our life back. To live and work and play. Take 2 doses. Take our life back. The health experts we trust. Take 2 doses. Take our life back. Vaccinate for you, for yours, for us.
Let's take our life back with a safe and effective AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. The mobile vaccination drive is coming to you. Visit the Ministry of Health and Wellness and Bureau of Health Education Facebook pages for more information. Let's take our life back. Vaccinate for you, for yours, for us.
Get vaccinated.
This message is brought to you by the Bureau of Health Education of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and this station.
Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching the weekend wrap-up, the week that was, and we're standing by to join the Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chastney, but we want to say good morning to you watching us live on Facebook as well as on the YouTube channel and also on the DVS television. Prime Minister Honorable Chastney has been in quarantine since his travels to Miami and New York. Prime Minister, are you with us? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Lucia?
Oh, wow. What a very strong and happy tone that we are hearing here this morning. You seem to be quite cheery because lots of people are complaining about the quarantine factor. You don't seem to have that bug. How have you been holding up?
I've been holding up fine. I'm very lucky, that I'm able to do some home quarantining. So at least it's a familiar space, and because of today's technology, I was able to attend several meetings through Zoom this week, including Cabinet, and several other meetings that we had with international organizations, including a CARICOM heads meeting on the final selection of the new CARICOM Secretariat.
Yes, very well. We see that a woman is now at the CARICOM Secretariat as the Secretary General. So Jesse and I are very pleased about that fact, Prime Minister. So thank you for tossing in your vote there.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the two final candidates both were female, so obviously we were going to break history. And in the case of the Surinese candidate, she withdrew. So we ended up with the candidate from Belize, who is no stranger to CARICOM. She used to be the Deputy Secretary of CARICOM in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I think we've gotten a very good choice. But it's not to say that CARICOM doesn't have its own challenges moving forward.
And that's something we'll get to discuss in a little while longer. But we want to talk about your travels, what led you there into quarantine. Certainly, you went over to Miami so that you can have discussions there with the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association. We know that you were having discussions regarding a home port in Vieux as part of the development of the South, part of that priority development there, as well as being chair. Are you co-chair, Prime Minister, of the FCCA? Is that correct?
Well, Mia Motley is the chair of the entire Caribbean, and I'm the chair of the CARICOM region.
Okay, very well. Any updates that you can give us regarding the home port?
Sure, and before we get there, I heard you mention my trip to New York as well. Sadly, the meeting I was supposed to have in New York was canceled, and so therefore I just had additional meetings in Miami before I came back home. In terms of the meetings with the cruise industry, there's a couple of very good things. I mean, we've been working on the home port for Vieux Fort for the longest time. Sadly, just before or just after we signed an agreement with Carnival and Royal Caribbean, we got COVID, and the balance sheets of many of the cruise companies really fell through the floor. And it was important to see how we were going to resurrect this project. The good thing is that the port is a critical strategic asset that's not only beneficial to St. Lucia, but also significantly beneficial to the cruise industry. And so therefore, COVID has really given it even a stronger level of endorsement for its need. Barbados is a great home port. Martinique, Guadeloupe, and even Antigua does some home porting as well. But the size of the new ships that are coming in certainly would not allow any one port by itself to be a home port. And so bringing St. Lucia into the fray, and particularly now that we have the new international airport coming in, and I think that this is really a good opportunity, hopefully, for St. Lucians to understand the strategy that their government has developed. Originally, Alyssa, when we were doing the international airport, the new international airport, the building was actually supposed to be in the car park of the HIA airport. And once the new building was built, the plan was to demolish the existing building as we know it. That was obviously supposed to have happened in between 2009, 2011. And sadly, when the new government came in, I shouldn't say sadly, they continued those plans, but were not able to bring it to any kind of fruition. And certainly when we came in and we relooked at the plan, we realized that the number of arrivals that we have at the airport had increased significantly from 300,000 arrivals to 450,000 arrivals. So doing construction of the new building in the back of the old building, we think would have been detrimental to the quality of services that we would have provided. and also now understanding how close we were to getting a home port facility, the decision was to move the terminal perpendicular or off to the side of the bottom of the Kakabeth as we know it. What that would have allowed us to do is the following. One is to build a new airport without interfering with the day-to-day operations of the existing terminal. And that once the new airport is finished, the goal is to convert the old airport specifically into a charter hall, but one designed very much in mind of home porting. So what would happen is passengers would arrive off of the flight into the existing HIA terminal, which would be reconfigured, and passengers would not be clearing customs and immigration in that facility. What they in fact would be doing is being processed to get into their cabin. So they would get their room keys, they would put all their credit card information, etc. And literally when they leave that terminal to the ship, which is only about 1.5 miles away, they actually would be just going straight to their cabin, and their bags would have been sent in advance. And similarly, the reverse works. So when they get off the ship to reconnect on their flight, they actually would be checking in on their flight at that facility. So the cruise industry are extremely excited by this prospect. One, that the terminal is so close to the port, and two, the ability of having a dedicated terminal for their passengers when they arrive, which is certainly going to help with logistics significantly, saving time, saving money, and we think creating a better environment for the customers when they come to St. Lucia for home porting. The difficulty that we've had, Lisa, was one, overcoming the current financial status of the cruise industry. And secondly, that the cruise companies wanted to be satisfied that there were sufficient tours available from Viewport to service the remaining passengers. Because as I indicated to you, not all of the passengers getting on the ship would be coming on from St. Lucia. So there would be other passengers who arrive on that same ship and would be going on an excursion for the day. And so we've been working very closely with them to give them the assurance, one, that Soufrière is actually closer to Viewport, substantially closer to Viewport than Castries is. So it means that there's extra time that persons can stay in Soufrière. And what are some of the new tours that we're doing in the Soufrière area. The second one is the opportunity for new tours between Viewport and Soufrière, as well as between Viewport and Dennery. You know, you have the zip line already in Dennery. So for instance, in my own constituency, there's a place called Descat that has a beautiful bird watching area. And it actually connects all the way to Mini in Soufrière. And sorry, the goal would be to create a zip line between Soufrière and Micoud, so passengers could go into Soufrière, do some tours there, zip line across down to Micoud, enjoy some of the beautiful waterfalls and other attractions we have in Micoud, and then drive back from Micoud all the way back down to the cruise ship. So these are exciting times, and it was to meet with the senior executives of the company, not at the highest level, but at the technical level, because the highest level has already signed off on this initiative, and it was really to work out the final details. So I am very excited about the prospects, and I will be making a more formal pronouncement, hopefully in the beginning of June, and I'm hoping that the MOU between the cruise industry and St. Lucia would have reached the point where we can sign it. So those are the details that we're working on. I felt it was important to go up to Miami because this has been one of the projects that we started from day one, and I certainly want to see it through its fruition before elections.
So, Prime Minister, just a follow-up on that. We know that for St. Lucians, it's such a mammoth project. And I believe that in the minds of the public, the question would be, how do we know that this is really going to take off and flourish, especially given the COVID environment? Because you did speak to the financial status of the cruise companies. So are they jittery at all about coming on in this partnership?
As I indicated, Lisa, they're actually pretty excited because what is happening in the cruise industry, and we saw the same thing happened in 9/11, where new technology comes in. So the cruise industry actually have been selling off their smaller ships and actually now going to much larger, newer ships that are much more efficient. The new ship that's coming in to replace the current P&O ship is 6,500 passengers. So it's impossible for any one island in the Southern Caribbean to be able to process that number of people in one day. So what they're doing is what we're calling is multi home ports. So for instance, MSC has been doing this for a couple of years, where they've been using Guadeloupe and Martinique as home porting facilities. And even them now, with some of the larger ships coming in, and certainly because Martinique and Guadeloupe are part of Europe, and whenever there's protocols put in place, it applies to both of them. So they want to be able to minimize their risk, are realizing that they want to be able to look at some other things. And so we are certainly in discussions with them in the hopes that we can convince them to come and join the group that we have. But certainly the size of the ships, and the other thing that's very interesting, Lisa, and this has been going back and forth for a couple of months right now, where the CDC in the US, up until last week, had not approved the commencement of the cruise industry. So what the cruise industry did, Norwegian Cruise Lines, Royal Caribbean, and also Carnival, is to use home ports in the Caribbean. So the Dominican Republic, St. Martin, and Barbados. And because we have approved protocols for their entry into this market, it has facilitated now them getting started without having to get the US approval. It has been for many years, and I can say that I go back to the 1990s, that we have been trying to convince the cruise industry to maintain a summer program in the Eastern Caribbean. Our argument has been that we're investing heavily in the assets of the ports, and it's very difficult to amortize those costs just over a 6-month period. What I mean by that is that if you're putting out $100 of investment and you're only using the asset half the time, it's going to take much longer to pay back for that asset. And so encouraging them to have operations is very, very important. So we have been able to, Mia and myself and the other leaders of this region, to convince the cruise industry to recommence services starting in the Eastern Caribbean as early as June, and in some and other cases in July. This is a massive transformation, and we really think that this is now going to open up an opportunity moving forward that we could see the cruise industry here in the summer. Now, if that is going to happen, Lisa, then it puts even more need for a logistical location like a St. Lucia, because nobody can offer where the cruise ship port and the airport are in such close proximity to each other. So we do know that from a business perspective that this makes a lot of sense. We do know that St. Lucia is one of the more attractive Caribbean destinations because of the amount of tours that we have. So certainly domestically, I know, and I think many other St. Lucians in the South know, that the South has a tremendous amount of opportunity for new tours. I dare say even more so than we have in the North. And I think opening up that opportunity is going to be massive. I mean, and think of all of the taxi drivers for all those years that have only been able to fly between Hunor Airport as an airport transfer up north. Now they're going to have an opportunity to be able to provide tours on a regular basis from Vieux Fort to Soufrière, and with stops in Choiseul and Labrie as well as going up to Dennery. So I think this is a massive opportunity for the South and a huge opportunity for St. Lucia.
But before I let Jesse jump in, I just want to ask Prime Minister, so where do you see village tourism fitting into that to make a more competitive product for St. Lucia? How would the two marry?
Thank you for asking that question. It's a very relevant one. Village tourism really has two components to it. The Village Tourism Agency, which is an entity that's going to be providing services to small properties. So we will provide an accounting system, provide a marketing platform. They will provide training on health and safety, as well as improving the quality of services in each of those products, as well as helping them develop business plans. The second component really is village tourism, which is about the infrastructure. So very similar to what's been taking place in Soufrière, what's been taking place now in Ancillary Canneries, as well as in Groselet. And, you know, Dennery South has also done an amazing job of improving their environment. So what we believe is that one of the impediments to smaller businesses succeeding, Lisa, has been the state of the infrastructure. I see too many small businesses being marginalized because the neighborhoods that they're in are just not attractive enough. So the idea of fixing up sidewalks, helping highlight the architecture that exists in the village, as well as improving the waterfront facilities, putting in proper recreational parks. So if you take Soufrière as an example, the improvements to Hummingbird Beach, the bridge, now brings you into town where you have the beautiful square. You have what we've done in Old Trafford, and now the new huts that are being developed all the way to the copper factory. And the goal is to make the copper factory into, I dare say, a shopping mall, but it would be called the factory, and that shopping mall would be a mall with a difference in that these are small businesses. So a person who's producing soap would be producing it there and have retail. A person who is doing a batik would do the batik there as well as now have retail. So the person's going to this factory can actually see local products being produced, so whether they're from coconut or other indigenous products that we have. You have woodcrafting, you have painting, you have all the different things that we're currently doing that would be on display in this thing. Now, take it from a tourist that's walking through, coming from Hummingbird, the improvements in the upgrading of our cemetery, passing by Old Trafalgar, getting into the town now and seeing this beautiful square that we have. And then now the improvements that we're doing in Diamond with the new road going to Esperance and opening up the entire part of Soufrière. The same thing now applies for persons who have Airbnb products. So the goal is to have Airbnb products in which the villages now become the centerpiece, and people are coming down there to go to restaurants and to go shopping and to enjoy an authentic solution experience, but at a very high standard. So for the cruise industry, they benefit from this because that's what many tourists want. Many more tourists want to actually go on independent tours where they literally get into a taxi and say to them, take me to somewhere that's very local. And then they're going to have the Labrie village, they have the Choiseul village, they have Soufrière, they have Miku village, they have the Dennery village, all that they can go to and spend the day in which they are the beach being shared with the fishermen. And so they coexist with each other. You can go to a local bakery, you can go to local restaurants, and you have your little cafes that you can be walking around, intertwined with different shops. So this is the experience that people are looking for. And so certainly St. Lucia has chosen a path of let St. Lucia inspire you. And really it's an authentic experience. We clearly will have some larger hotels because we need those as critical mass to bring in the airlift, but we really want to be known for our village tourism.
Jesse?
Mr. PM, if you could just, as you indicated, St. Lucia is well poised to benefit from a resuscitated cruise sector. Our appeal indisputable, but for us to enjoy a resumption of calls in June, latest July, as you've been advocating for, what do the cruise executives need to get over, to maneuver through to be able to begin the port calls? I'm talking conditional sailing for the conditional sailing order coming from the CDC, mandatory vaccinations. Walk us through that process.
So we've had very good meetings, and I really want to thank Prime Minister Motley, who is chaired, and her Minister of Tourism, Lisa Cummings, along with our Minister of Tourism, Dominique Fady, Beverly here, and the team here for the work that they've been doing, not only on behalf of St. Lucia, but on behalf of the entire CARICOM. What we're looking at is that everybody who would be on the ship would be vaccinated. Both the crew as well as the guests. The complicated matter is that persons under the age of 18 and certainly persons under the age of 10 are probably not going to be vaccinated, and what are the protocols we're going to put in place, and that's what we're working through right now for those specific persons. The other thing would be is that an itinerary of 4 destinations becomes 1 destination. So if in fact St. Lucia requires 5 days for PCR testing, but Barbados requires 24 hours for PCR testing, then the requirement for a person to get on the ship would be 24 hours. But once they come on the ship, it's like them being in Barbados, being in St. Lucia, being in Dominica, and being in Antigua simultaneously, because we have to have the same protocols. And then the goal is for the CMOs of each one of those countries to work as one. So basically, there would be a checklist of things that the ships would have to do, be mandated to do, and each of the CMOs would be required when the ship is in port to make sure that those things are being done. And if in fact somebody does test positive, how do we handle that? So we now know it's not the kiss of death, that if that happens, if the person is being properly isolated, and each time they go into the port, the CMO's office is going in and making sure that the proper protocols are being adhered to ensure the safety of everybody on the ship and ultimately the safety of everybody on the island. In the case of St. Lucia, we have been coexisting with COVID. We've created a bubble for our tourism industry, and that bubble has continued to grow, meaning that in addition to having access to the hotel, that the tourists are now having access to certain tours. And so the persons who are providing those tours have actually been practicing the necessary protocols and are being properly observed on a regular basis to make sure that we're not spreading any disease locally. So that's really fortunate for the cruise industry, because it means they can benefit automatically from that experience, particularly if all the persons who are going on the tours have been vaccinated. I mean, vaccinated means that they've gotten either the 1 J&J jab or they've gotten 2 of the other jabs, and it would have to be at least 2 weeks after their second jab that they would be considered to be vaccinated. So we believe we have a great product, and now each one of the countries are doing similarly to St. Lucia in working out what their protocols are going to be. In terms of the CDC, as I indicated to you earlier, it's now a moot point because we're getting much closer to the CDC approving the commencement of ships. So the case of Bahamas, the flights were coming into Bahamas and people were joining the ship in the Bahamas. And so it did not require CDC approval, it just needed to meet the protocols of the Bahamas. And the Bahamas now have changed their protocols to say anybody who has been vaccinated and has a PCR test, they don't have to quarantine in that country. So I would imagine that this is pretty much where the protocols are going to be going. I know that here in St. Lucia, during this week, we will be having very intense discussions as to how we're going to start dealing with vaccinated individuals, both St. Lucians returning home, as well as tourists coming to our country, because there are more and more people being vaccinated globally.
But PM, give us an idea, if the discussions have gotten that far, once we have the cruise visitors on island, how are they going to be moving around? Have we prepared the tours subsector in order to be able to have the recommencement of business? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, as I said, is that they would really benefit from the fact that our hotel sector, that we've already been working with tours. So many tours, going back to the Sulphur Springs, day trips, etc., zip lines, have all been opened and have been practicing the necessary protocols, meaning that the buses that are bringing them there, the drivers, like the drivers from the airport, are being inspected and evaluated on a regular basis and have been taught how to deal with the protocols. So the cruise industry actually will benefit from the work that's already been done. So those same tours that are available to the hotel sector would automatically be available to our cruise passengers. And that is made much easier given the fact that all of the cruise ship passengers would have been vaccinated.
Are we going to be seeing a sort of the bustling returning to the, for example, say the Castries Market or the Vendors Arcade?
I don't think we're going to see that right off the bat, Melissa. So the goal is to try to get some of those vendors located at Point Seraphim to make sure that when they're in the little bubble at Point Seraphim that they are protected, and it means that they would just be interacting with the vendors and not having to interact with the local population on their way to the vendors. So I think that that would be phase one. But, you know, ultimately, all of us are hoping that every single person would be vaccinated. And I think that this is really one of the crucial points that the CMO had been making. And then let me just reinforce it. If we want to get back to some level of normalcy in our society, it requires a level of herd immunity to do so. If we know that the solution population is protected, then it gives us the opportunity to be a bit more aggressive on how quickly and how fast, to what extent we open up our economy. But as long as the number of people who have not been vaccinated remains the majority in our country, then we have to be very cautious. Now, we're lucky in that we have been able to create this tourism bubble. But I want to say that not every person or every hotel has benefited from that tourism bubble. Our rent-a-cars, our vendors have not been able to benefit. Not all of our tours have been able to benefit from the reopening of our tourism economy. You know, so I just want to say that we're in control of our own destiny at this point, and how quickly we want to see a recovery. And we know that now that there are jobs that the tourism industry created for us that can't be replaced. So it's not like tourism is competing against any of the other sectors. Tourism complements all of those sectors. But certainly the jobs that are being created and the pay scale and the amount of money that we make, there is no other industry here that can replace that. And I'm just really hoping that solutions would see the sense. And exactly what the campaign says is for you, for us, and for all of us, is really the theme. We need to take our vaccine to protect ourselves, to protect our family. But more importantly, and very importantly, sorry, is to open up our economy.
PM, so speaking of which, the hope by October you indicated was to have herd immunity, or at least having 70% of the population having immunity. What are your thoughts now, based on your interactions with other leaders in the region? How satisfied are you all with the progress that has been made so far? In our particular instance, we have 25,000 receiving their first dose and 16,000 getting their second. How satisfied are you in terms of that metric, based on the overall goal for vaccination, we know, which is contingent on us moving forward?
You know, I'm asked that question very often, and I keep saying to people, the good news is that there's pretty much been almost 100% uptake of the number of vaccines that we've had. So we only were able to give 25,000 first jabs, and we're in the process of now completing the next 25,000 on the second jab. Now that we've gotten another 26,400, and we're in the process of getting hopefully another 24,600 by the time the end of May comes, that would now allow us to vaccinate another 50,000 people altogether. Sorry, another 25,000 means we would have had vaccinated 50,000 people. So from a solution perspective, I think the next couple of weeks will really tell the story in terms of St. Lucia's willingness to take the vaccination. But I'm hoping that just even the recent events where we've seen an uptake, an increase in a number of cases, this fight is not over. And the only way we can fight this battle and win is by people becoming vaccinated. And it was very sad, a football team from Vieux Fort that had been practicing for months to be able to go off to the tournament. A day before they were supposed to go, 5 of the players tested positive and the trip was canceled. So this is the level of investment we're all making, and it's being marginalized because of COVID. So I'm really hoping that St. Lucians would now start to understand and appreciate that this thing never goes away. So there are countries who went through long periods of time, like St. Lucia, without any COVID cases, and then all of a sudden it comes into your community and it starts spreading. So the bigger challenge I have to say to you is getting more vaccines, and that's the one which the leaders of this region and globally developing countries have lamented about, is the access to it. Now, that being said, I'm very appreciative of COVID of COVAX, because they have actually delivered so far on what they had promised. But that's only 20% of the population. We still now have to find vaccines for at least another 60% of the population to get to a herd immunity. We are seeing this success in Israel by getting herd immunity. Sadly, Seychelles thought they had reached a herd immunity, and then now there was a significant outbreak, and they were at 60% vaccination. So again, the more people that can become vaccinated, the ideal being everybody being vaccinated, then I think that's the only time that we can assure full protection. And once we know that the population is fully protected, that would give us the opportunity of more aggressively opening up our economy.
Okay, Prime Minister, we'll take a very short break, let you catch your breath a little while. I want to pick up from where you just left off, because I was going to ask you about procuring those vaccines. While COVAX has done great, as you indicated, by being able to give us what was promised, we still need to go out there and source for ourselves as well. So I would want you to give us a little insight into what it is like to find those vaccines, to procure them, to pay for them, what that experience is like. So we'll take a short break. You can catch your breath, get something to drink, and we'll be back. We have our discussion with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia.
We at war with a virus, ready to harm us. Panic is not the answer. We can win this together. Often use hand sanitizer, better yet use soap and water.
We must protect each other if we are to beat this corona.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. Be a soldier, together we can beat this corona.
So you don't become the next case. Avoid touching your face. I'm sure you've been told so. Handshakes and hugging are no.
Advice, give you the please. Cover your mouth and your nose if you cough or sneeze.
Practice social distancing and avoid large social gatherings.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. St. Lucia, be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
For further information, please contact the hotline at 311 or the Bureau of Health Education at 468-5349.
And thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching the very special weekend wrap-up, the week that was. I'm here in studio with Jesse Leos, and we're speaking with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Alan Chastney. We've discussed a whole lot. We've talked about his travels, where he discussed with the FCCA, the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association, the home port for Vieux Fort, that and how it's going to transform the south of the island. And we've gone into the discussion regarding vaccines, the vaccination campaign. And before we took the break, I posed a question to Prime Minister to give us an idea of what it is like to seek out those vaccines, the procurement process. Prime Minister, you still with us?
I am.
Okay. So can you give us that little sort of peepway into what it is you have to go through, the hurdles perhaps that you have to overcome in order to secure and procure those vaccines?
You know, it's very similar to what happened earlier part of COVID when we were trying to get ventilators and PPE. And I think I always remember, and I always make reference to it, to Governor Cuomo lamenting how difficult it was for the state of New York to procure. And then when he thought all of a sudden he had a deal just before it was about to arrive, the person would call him and say, look, the price has gone up because I have somebody else I could sell it to. And you know, you find yourself compromised between principle and necessity. And so you pay the extra amount of money, even though you think that on a principle basis you already had an agreement. But we're going through the same kind of process right now with the vaccines. And every time you think that you have a deal, then it changes. So for instance, many times we've had arrangements thinking that we were going to be getting the vaccines. And then all of a sudden you had the significant outbreak in India, and all of a sudden India needed additional vaccines. You had a fourth wave taking place in Europe, and you found yourself competing against some of those larger countries for those same vaccines. And then you have the other situation where you have some larger countries which are making sure that they vaccinate their population before they export any vaccines. So it is a significant part of every day of mine is being spent on trying to procure and secure additional vaccines. I know that that is the critical step for us to turn a major corner in this COVID battle. I certainly want to protect and make sure everybody's protected. So the first responsibility of the state is to make sure that we have access to the vaccines. The second part is really to hopefully convince people to take the vaccines. Now, St. Lucia has taken a position that we're not going to make it mandatory for anyone, but I do know that there are businesses that are conflicted in terms of requiring their staff to be vaccinated. And I certainly understand and appreciate the difficulty that they have, because from a business perspective, you want to make sure your business can run because you're making certain obligations. And you also want to make sure that your staff who are at work are also protected. So naturally, if everybody was vaccinated, that would make it substantially easier. How to have some people vaccinated and some people not vaccinated, and what are the protocols for one and what are the protocols for the other, that starts becoming very complicated. And it's the same thing with the state is finding itself in that particular position. But getting vaccines right now, Lissa, very difficult. I don't know of many countries that have been successful, other than the initial offerings by the government of India. I don't know of many small island developing states at all that have been able to get vaccines. Some of them chose to go with the Chinese vaccine early in the game before it was approved by WHO. In the case of St. Lucia, we have insisted that whatever vaccine we use has to be approved by WHO and by PAHO, by CARPHA, before that we would utilize it.
Speak to the integrated approach, the pursuit that all of you are coming together as a unified body to try to procure vaccines. Speak to the strength of that.
At least within the OECS.
We're trying to do it within the OECS. I think the OECS has had a lot more success in that regard, but we're also trying with CARICOM to some extent. But within the OECS, even the procurement through the sourcing through the Indian government, Prime Minister Scary alerted us that India was offering these vaccines, and we wrote both as the OECS and individually. The vaccines came at different periods, but luckily you saw that Dominica and also Barbados shared some of their initial vaccines because to get the program started, and we quickly saw that we were able to get the other doses. But other than that, even the OECS is having difficulty in sourcing vaccines collectively. It's just very difficult right now. I'm hoping that as America and now the UK and Europe start reaching certain thresholds, that more and more vaccines would be made available. But again, you have Africa now, you have what's going on in Asia, because in India, it's spread to Nepal. I know that Pakistan is very concerned as to what may happen on their borders. So if you start seeing a larger outbreak in those areas, those are millions and millions of people, and could certainly hinder our ability of getting more vaccines.
And Prime Minister, just a question in terms of here at home, our state of emergency extension. If you could just issue an appeal to the general public, because I know, even while the debate was happening in the Honorable House, we did have many persons on the ground speaking and giving their perspectives on that October 16 extension. So speak to the rationale behind that, and we know many persons are were equally concerned with respect to it being the year where elections are constitutionally due. So if you could just reinforce the points that you made during the parliamentary proceedings.
So first of all, the state of emergency is necessary because it's the only legal instrument that gives us the ability to have a curfew. All of the other protocols from a legal perspective are handled through the COVID Act. And we made that point from very early, as going back to September of last year. But when we started seeing a significant increase in cases again in January and February, we know that there are two particular protocols that have a significant impact in curtailing the spread of COVID. One is curfews, and the other one is the sale of alcohol. Because this is a social disease. And so if you cut back on the hours that people can be out on, and secondly, if you eliminate the consumption of alcohol, and you have two different levels you can go to, but certainly eliminating it at commercial places, the level of activity comes right now. We also have to always be cognizant of the limitations of our police force. The fact that we had to bring in wardens tells you that COVID is stretching our police force and putting us in a very precarious position. And so I cannot allow the security of the nation to be compromised. And we may have to consider bringing back the wardens, considering we're seeing an increase in cases right now. But the state of emergency, over the year or whatever that we had it in place, we've only used it for COVID. And this is the point that we keep making. And the objective or the benefit of having an opposition is that any time that the opposition or any of the civil societies believe that we are abusing the state of emergency for anything else other than COVID, they're free to say so. And certainly my government would respond to it. But while it does give us extraordinary powers, and that's what a state of emergency does, we have not relied on the state of emergency for anything else other than the curfew. So some of the concerns I heard being brought up in both the lower and the upper house really are just playing to the gallery, because there is no evidence that this government in any way has abused the authority that it has under a state of emergency. The rationale for extending it until October is very, very simple. The 5 years of Parliament comes to an end on July 12th. So after July 12th, if in fact the elections take place after that fact, we don't have the ability to come back to Parliament. But there was a representative that did indicate that there is something written in the Constitution that if there's a case of emergency, we can come back to Parliament. Our argument was, why would you keep coming back on a monthly basis to approve something as basic as this? If in fact we don't need the state of the emergency, all we have to do is to put an order in the Gazette. The Governor General is able to do that on the advice of the Prime Minister. So there is no big concern here. People are reading way too much into it. Oh, because I put it to October, it means that we're going to have elections in October. That could be. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I've indicated repetitively that the date of the election is going to be predicated on the access to vaccines. If I think that we can get vaccines and get to herd immunity, then I think for the sake of the population of this country, it's worth it to wait. If in fact we're not going to get the vaccines, then that's something that I would have to then give consideration to, because it means we would have elections without herd immunity, and we'll go from there. But the fear that some people are trying to create with the state of emergency is not there. We've only used it for the time curfews. We've not used it for anything else. All of the other policies or laws that we've put in place have been through the COVID Act.
And so do you speak about the fear that some may want to perpetuate, Prime Minister? What is your fear? Is your fear that if the elections were to be held during this time without having achieved that herd immunity, that we may very well fall to the sort of escalated cases that we saw following Christmas? And of course, it would be at a larger scale. Is that your fear?
That is absolutely my fear, and there's certainly substantial proof globally about that. We saw what happened after the elections in Jamaica, elections in Trinidad. You have just recently India. I mean, the spike that's taking place after they had beaten it out is being attributed to the elections. We've seen where we've had political meetings, large numbers of people gathering together, and we've seen what's happened afterwards. So we know that once that bell is rung, that people are going to want to express their democratic rights, and I understand that. And we have to make sure that we're protecting the people as much as possible. Once we've achieved that, or if we cannot achieve that, then the next thing is to determine what the protocols would be during the election period. And I know that the CMO and the Commissioner of Police, as well as the Electoral Commission, have already been working on what those protocols are going to be based on what the current situation is. So if we have herd immunity, then it can be a little bit more liberal. If it's not herd immunity, then it's going to be a very different election than we had envisaged or have experienced in the past.
Okay. I want to take you to another national, international issue. Prime Minister, St. Lucia has been included on the list of countries and territories receiving the sort of amber light from the United Kingdom. The UK has been using a sort of traffic stop light system to determine travel by the nationals to countries. So we are there in the amber list. Your thoughts on that?
The list basically is a green list, an amber list, and red. And there are implications, there are subtle implications in all of them. So with a green light, persons going to travel to a country which is green do not have to quarantine when they go back. When you're in amber, you go into what's called a voluntary quarantining for 10 days. And then if you're in red, you have to go into a government licensed quarantine area. So very different. But the other big one really is, and that's the discussion that's taking place, is from an insurance perspective. If a person goes to a green light, the insurance companies seem to have said, yes, we will cover you. If you go to an amber, it's still questionable as to whether the insurance companies are going to cover you or not. And certainly if you go to a red, my understanding is the insurance companies will not cover you. None of the countries in the Caribbean were able to make it onto the green list. And even the United States was put into amber. I'm waiting to see over the next couple of weeks how that works out. British Airways did reduce the number of flights from 4 to 2. I've been speaking to many of the hoteliers. They have not seen significant cancellations as yet, but they're also not receiving a lot of new bookings. So I think everybody's waiting to see how the system works and whether, in fact, the British citizens gain confidence in going into an amber destination. TUI is an example. are flying to countries that are green, amber, and red. And so when the United Kingdom earlier in the year tried to restrict people from traveling from zones in the UK, we did not see any change. The United States, even though almost all the Caribbean islands are in category 4 of the CDC, I mean, American Airlines' load factor to St. Lucia for the month of May was 93%. I mean, when I traveled up on the flight, there was one empty seat. When I came back on the flight, there was no empty seats. And we continue to see that trend grow from day to day. So the consumers ultimately are going to make the decision. And we have to wait a little bit to see how the consumers react to these new protocols that the UK government has put in. And I think that that's how I envision it. There's a protocol for green, a protocol for amber, and a protocol for red. Let's see how the public reacts to it now. We'll know better in a couple of weeks.
And we are positioning ourselves to be able to respond to the market demand or the slug that may come after, as a result.
We are. Royalton is opening up this week. L'Esport is also opening up in anticipation of seeing a return to the UK business. I know that Sandals Halcyon has been open waiting for the UK passengers, but it's becoming more and more difficult for them because the US market is growing so strongly. But we're very confident, Lisa, that there will be a strong rebound in tourism. We think St. Lucia has positioned itself extremely well to take advantage of those opportunities. And I really want to thank the CMO and her team and the team at the Ministry of Tourism and also at Home Affairs for the amazing job they've been doing in updating the cabinet and bringing in relevant protocols that are practical, but at the same time are making sure we protect solutions.
On the regional front, Prime Minister, we know our neighbors, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the volcano still very much rumbling there. The St. Lucian community over there, what has been a sort of dialogue taking place with our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent?
I know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also our diaspora office have been doing a really good job of making sure we stay on top of that. And certainly they're no stranger from home, so they always know that if they want to come home, they are available to come home, and we would accommodate them in every way possible to make sure they're seamlessly brought into the school system for their kids, because that's really the biggest issue at this point. Very sad to see what's taking place over in St. Vincent on top of the COVID situation. It's very difficult. And now we're also entering into the hurricane season. But this is the plight that we continue to fight on an international level, that there are many exogenous shocks that are brought upon us, and that we really do need assistance when they do happen. I'm convinced now, sadly, that we need to build up a bigger reserve of funds of our own to be able to handle these types of exogenous shocks. But I think that Prime Minister Gonzalez put it extremely well, that his relationship within the OECS and CARICOM, really, he was overwhelmed with the level of support that came in and continues to come in. And St. Lucia will always play its part in making sure that we can help St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the best of our ability.
Prime Minister, today is the International Day of Families, and I bring that up because I noted that within the last 2 weeks that the Ministry of Equity, they've launched 2 programs, one a parenting program and the other targeting youth just this week through the arts, channeling their energies there through arts under the Youth Empowerment Program. And so your administration has been very very focused on being able to create a better, not just the living of the standard of living for families, but certainly creating that sort of social fabric for families to be better cohesive. I note that in Miku South, in your constituency, you spoke in the House of Assembly about a children's playground, which I found to be quite interesting. And I took note that you indicated that this will be replicated to other communities across the island. Can't wait for that in my own community.
Also to stick in there that this year's International Families Day is being observed is also focusing on the technological aspect of things. So how are we including technology into the families, into the communities?
So Prime Minister, through all of those initiatives, give us a sort of snapshot, if you will, of what your administration has been able to achieve in that regard, in that respect, and particularly, as I mentioned, they're dealing with families, dealing with whether it be families in crisis, creating better communities that would be able to facilitate families getting out and getting to know each other better, being able to play together, and that sort of thing.
Well, I think the first thing that we identified was the lack of social workers in our system. The social workers we had were clearly overburdened. While we have been able to increase the number of social workers, it's not by any stretch of the imagination sufficient. The other thing is that we believe that in providing better services to families, we need to decentralize government. So our emphasis on upgrading local government. So what we'd like to see is we'd like to see civil buildings where the representative office is there, the council's office is there, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the social workers, and the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Sports. So we think that these types of facilities, types of services are better administered on that local level than on a national level. So nationally, you want to have your policy, but the management implementation of those policies would be at a local level. Our vulnerability list, 2,200 people, which is a joke. We have been able to add another, I think it's 1,200 persons to that list. But the new technology that we're bringing in, where everybody has a singular ID number, and that we're able to identify what
Okay, we seem to have just lost the feed with the Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chasney. But just coming off of that live there, we hope we'll be able to reconnect so that he can complete his statement and also closing words before we wrap up.
Yes, so what we will do is take a very short break so that we can re-establish the link and see what exactly technical difficulty is there with the Prime Minister. Stay with us, we'll be back after the short break.
Do you know we can limit the spread of the COVID-19 virus? The Ministry of Health is your partner in achieving this solution. Introducing the Amber Wristwatch. The Amber Wristwatch is designed for monitoring daily movements while in quarantine. It provides an accurate location and a precise heart rate. The device is also waterproof and can be worn during all daily functions, like washing the dishes or taking a shower. It's worn like a typical timepiece. The Ministry of Health can now better monitor people in home quarantine and receive alerts of those who do not stay in the confines of their home. A 14-day rental of the Amber Wristwatch is just $75 US. Let us stop the breaches of home quarantine.
mommy took me to the dentist. Really? How was that? It wasn't bad. The dentist was really nice and she told me that mouth rinsing is very important for healthy teeth. How so? Rinsing with water gets rid of food in between your teeth, which can protect you from getting cavities. No way. So after I eat or drink anything, it's a good idea to rinse out my mouth with water. Yes! Make sure to spit out the water after rinsing because swallowing will only bring the germs into your body. Remember, water is an easy and cost-effective way to instantly boost your health and a healthy body to fight many diseases, including COVID-19.
To the elderly, no one's been spared. It's a state of emergency. Everyone is running scared. But like a knight in shining armor, you've been there. We can see a brighter tomorrow because you're here. Thanks for working on the front line. You bring us home. Thanks for working on the front line. Don't know how you cope. Thanks for working on the front line. My angels in disguise. Thanks for working on the front line. You bring tears of joy to my eyes. Firefighters, first responders, putting their lives on the line. All the nurses and doctors, the work you do is so divine. The police traffic officers, sacrificing every day. And all your family members, God protect you all, we pray. To all those who are departed, they gave their lives to serve. For being so kind-hearted, blessings you deserve. Thanks for working on the front line. You bring us home. Thanks for working on the front line. Don't know how you cope. Thanks for working on the front line. My angels in disguise. Thanks for working on the front line. You bring tears of joy to my eyes.
Thank you so much for staying with us on the weekend wrap-up. We did experience a technical break there with our Zoom call with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Adam Chasney. We've re-established the link. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being very quick in thinking. Are you still with us?
I am, Lisa. Thank you so very much.
Well, yes. You know, it's wonderful to have the technology. It is doing amazing things for us, but it can also fail us at times. So we're happy for that. But before we got that break, Prime Minister, you were speaking to us about some of the initiatives that the government of St. Lucia has taken with respect to improving lives for the vulnerable, including families. And you were discussing the works ongoing under the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice and Equity, and referring specifically there to the SLU Net, and talking about the singular ID that St. Lucians on that vulnerable list will now be having in order to better facilitate meeting their needs.
So, the critical thing here is when we go around and, Lucia, you and I have had many discussions on this issue, particularly single parents who are struggling. And the worst case is single parents who have not completed their high school degree, have not gotten a job. And as I've indicated, this becomes the responsibility of the state. And we have to be able to undertake that with the greatest level of integrity. And what I mean by that is, let's not fool ourselves as to whether we're helping these people or not. So a single parent with multiple kids and no job, we need to look at their housing needs, we need to look at the nutrition, we need to look at their school, we need to look at after school, that those kids are given every opportunity to succeed, and that we don't put an overburden on the single parent. But at the same time, as a state, we have to find ways to reduce the number of single parents that we have. And let me explain that, because that could be very controversial. We have younger girls who have been getting pregnant at underage, and we need to find a way to address this situation. We do have some that do a really great job after having their first child, and it can happen to anyone, that those parents step in and that child does not have another child. But sadly, we do see circumstances in where a younger girl in that same position who does not have that parental support end up having more than one kid even before they reach the age of 18. And it puts a significant burden on them, and more importantly, it has an impact on the children. I don't think that we can question whether the mother or the father loves those children. They do. We all know that. But whether they have the capacity to be able to provide for all of those children adequately, that becomes the issue. And I think that that's where the state has to fall in line. So we know from a social perspective of persons who are vulnerable that we have major plans afoot to be able to provide them direct assistance, whether it's health insurance, school feeding programs, bus transportation, giving them access now to the new ebooks that we have that also pays for the license fee for them so the kids have access to that, making sure that they have Wi-Fi at their homes. So this new registration system that we're going to have is going to be more accurate in determining people with needs. And as I'm saying to you, if you try to do that out of caste trees on a national basis, it's going to be complicated. So the goal is to strengthen local government so that the evaluation of these households can be done at a local level, which will be much easier to do and I think much more accurate. So that's one aspect of what we're doing to try to strengthen families. From a religious perspective, we strongly believe in the Lord, and we're hoping that everybody can have and choose some kind of faith. And I think that the church is doing an amazing job of trying to build back and support families and to share family values. From a sporting perspective, what we're doing right now with the sporting facilities, and then now trying to create sport clubs throughout the length and breadth of this country. And I always make reference to the aquatic sports facility, where there's 6 or 7 sporting clubs there, primary level and secondary level. We want to be able to replicate that, where you have sporting clubs in each of the constituencies. Those sporting clubs provide sporting games, primary school level, secondary school level, and at a senior level, and in multiple disciplines. The big challenge here, Alyssa, is to get parents to understand their role in clubs. It's not for the kids who are playing the sports to be going around trying to raise money for all the different things they're doing and to run the sporting club themselves. We need to see a greater level of consistency, and that's why we'll be encouraging parents to become active members of different sporting clubs. So if you played sports for VSADC and you now have passed the age of playing, volunteer your time back into the association to help build up that association. And what the government is intending to do is to make sure that the monies that we're getting from the NLA, that those monies now go in to help support programs, so that we know the times for the coaches, the uniforms, times for the lights, equipment would all be accessed through this fund, leaving more time for the parents and for the kids to actually participate in the different sports. And again, sports and entertainment, culture, play a strong role in bonding families together. I mean, we'd like to see on a Friday afternoon and a Friday evening, Saturdays and Sundays, that there's activities all over the place. And what does it do? It brings families in to support their kids. It helps build morale among the kids and builds their esteem because they can see the success that they're having. And many of the lessons that you learn in sports, as well as in dance, in acting, and in film, that discipline that's required are things that translate into your everyday life. So we have a very holistic perspective of family, bringing in the technology, as was indicated. But the core to this country is family. And we have a very big plan. We've been executing it and modifying the different organizations. So for instance, one of them is that we're looking to merge NLA, the National Lottery Association, in with the Gaming Authority, so that the Gaming Authority would take on the aspect of the regulations and now create a new entity, which would be the Youth and Sports Agency, which would now be targeted to use that money in the manner in which I just said, to support the development of the arts and to support the development of sports. And I have to say to you, the work that Sarah Flood has been doing with Synergy in this particular area is amazing. The rescue houses that she's created in Leclerc and another one down by Wilton's Yard are for men. And some of the other empowering programs that she's doing are specifically targeted to helping families and individuals. And I really have to commend her on that. And I'm really hoping that in my next administration, that we will now broaden the Synergy program to be implemented again through these the town councils in each of the different constituencies.
Absolutely there, and Jesse and myself as arts people, we can attest very much, Prime Minister, to your point that it certainly provides a level of discipline that you can carry on through to into your life. As we're going to wrap up, Prime Minister, I want to ask you, because at the start of the program you alluded to the CARICOM Secretariat and some of the things that perhaps changes that need to come about there as we look to our institutions in the region to continue to give us that sort of guidance and governance. With Dr. Carla Barnett being appointed, what are some of your expectations as a Prime Minister in the region for Dr. Barnett in how she is going to sort of transform and re-energize the CARICOM Secretariat and take it from where it is right now into a new era?
So there's a very critical meeting that's going to be taking place in July, which will be Dr. Barnett's first meeting. I think it's important, hopefully, that the heads agree on and we've been talking about this forever, a transformation of the CARICOM Secretariat. So, I have said publicly that I believe that the brand that we should have within CARICOM is West Indies. So, does it make more sense to have the Commonwealth of the West Indies or CARICOM? And when we look at a Commonwealth and we look at what has happened with the Commonwealth Secretariat and how it's structured in terms of technical assistance and helping and strengthening policy throughout the region is very, very important. So one, I think that the Secretariat that we have now, even its name needs to be reviewed. Certainly the structure of the CARICOM Secretariat has to be restructured. So when I looked at the job description just of the Secretary General, it's very vague. And I think that we have to become a little bit more specific and hold leadership at the Secretariat a little bit more accountable to what our objectives are. Certainly coming out of COVID, it's very clear that deeper regional integration is necessary. We're spending way too much money on services that we can't afford. So St. Lucia, with a population of 180,000, if we were to share in terms of security, let's just use security as an example, I think we should have a regional security force that is more present in our day-to-day lives than currently what we have, which is only on cases of emergency. We can deploy people to go to react to a situation, rather than having now a central database of everybody's fingerprinting, whether we have the access to DNA, because it's not to say that criminals are just staying in one place or the other. And we also have to have a greater focus on white-collar crime as well. And we're having discussions with regards to impacts. Is it possible for a police force to investigate itself locally? Whereas if you had a regional force that could do those things, I think it would strengthen the services in our country. Civil aviation authorities. Why do we have to have an OECS Civil Aviation Authority, Barbados Civil Aviation Authority, Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, Trinidad Civil Aviation Authority, when one is suffice? And even for the airlines doing business in CARICOM, it makes much sense if there is a common platform that they're operating on. It just makes it much easier. But COVID has really, I think, made it absolutely necessary that we have a deeper dive into integration. And the CARICOM Secretariat has to play a lead role in that. It can't just be about foreign affairs. I think foreign affairs is important, but I don't think it's the only thing. And certainly for us at OACS, we're now meeting on a more regular basis. We're now getting the central bank to be more integrated in terms of policy and also in harmonization. So we hear many times that we go to the Parliament and pass bills that have already been approved by the other OECS countries in the sake of harmonization. And I think this is the same thing that needs to take place at the CARICOM. And I'm really hoping that Dr. Barnett, being a person who has worked there before, has left and is now coming back, that we're going to start seeing these kind of changes taking place. They're tough changes to make.
Indeed, change is always difficult and uncomfortable for some, sir. Final question to you for this morning. Leaving St. Lucia and doing your international travel, how would you match us up against what you experienced traveling in terms of the protocols? How well have we done in ensuring that our protocols are as tight as possible and giving the travelers that sense of the safety and security?
You know, there's a very simple number, Alyssa. Our TripAdvisor ratings as a country have actually gone up higher post-COVID than they were pre-COVID. And that would include the processes at the airport, but I keep a very close eye at what's taking place at the airport. And people really give us very high marks on how we're processing persons. It gives them a sense of confidence that they actually are procedures and people are following up. I mean, when the United States of America, as an example, said that people are going to be quarantined when they go back home, people were laughing because when they got back to New York City, as an example, there was nobody there to meet them. There was no processes in place. It just becomes impossible with the numbers that they were trying to deal with. That's the benefit of being a smaller country. That we can put those procedures in and we can follow them up. I have to say too that when I was in Miami, it was really remarkable to see the recovery in the economy there and how well the state of Florida is doing. Miami was booming, real estate is booming, hotels were full. So we know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and critically for us as a country is to take control of our own destiny. And I'm really appealing to everybody to become vaccinated. This is really right now the best way that we can move forward. And I'm really hoping that people would learn from what's just happened in the last 2 weeks, where we've seen the cases go from, I think we made it below 100. I think we got to almost 80 active cases. And now we're back up to 180 active cases, as to how quickly this thing can turn around. And be assured that the only way of making sure that we can bring this thing absolutely under control is for everyone to become vaccinated. And I'm really appealing to everybody in St. Lucia to do that. Take advantage of the vaccines being here, become vaccinated. You know, the challenge that we have as a government is to make sure we have enough vaccines, and we're going to make sure that we do that. I'm not making any excuses. As difficult as it is, we'll keep on persevering until we can find a solution and get the additional vaccines we require here in St. Lucia.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. And just really on a lighter note, I want to just ask, you have any favorite quarantine food yet? Because you still have another week to go in quarantine. So anything popping up as your favorite thing you just have to have?
Well, you know what's been, I've actually taken advantage of the situation. At least once a year we go on a cleanse. So I'm using the opportunity right now to do a cleanse. So, you know, I have a fruit shake in the morning. I have either fish with brown rice or chicken with brown rice and some vegetables, and I have a soup for dinner. And I try to eat before 7 o'clock so we don't eat for another 12 hours. So I'm trying to do that for at least 3 weeks. So I've been on that. So you've only opened up the Pandora's box per se and making me think about what I'm missing. But right now, I'm trying to be very disciplined and just make sure I continue with this cleansing. Both my wife are on it, and she's also trying to get me to do yoga. I had done some yoga before, but she's out here with all her blocks and everything else and teaching me new things. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, we're very happy to hear, Prime Minister, that you know, that eating that menu you just described, it's very healthy. It's only going to add to that immunity, your immune system, boosting your immune system. Now that you are vaccinated, you have your full dose there of vaccination. So, Prime Minister, continue to enjoy the little rest, and I know that you are working as well, as you indicated earlier, that the Zoom calls are helping facilitate you continuing to do your official duties while you are in quarantine. So thank you very much for taking the time out on this Saturday morning for speaking with myself and Jesse on the weekend wrap-up. The information has been invaluable.
Well, I just want to thank you and Jesse and all the team at NTN for the incredible job that you've been doing in keeping the nation informed. I thank you very much, and please stay safe.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Thank you, and we do hope he comes out of quarantine with a clean bill of health.
Absolutely. Yeah. What will be seen is a leaner, fitter Prime Minister, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and more zen with the
more zen,
yoga.
You know. You think he'll take to the yoga?
I'm not sure. I can't
He
say.
seemed a little hesitant there.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm sure First Lady has it covered.
She has that covered, being able to have him do that. So, Jesse, as we enter into the May 17 week, we know that we have the vaccination sites. They continue for that week. Give some information. Do you have information on where they are? Let me just see.
Also letting you know about the pop-up vaccination locations as well. So we're just encouraging persons to go on to the Ministry of Health, Department of Health and Wellness Facebook page, because there, if you just click their follow, you will get the notifications as to when they will be where and when they will be administering vaccines. I will also be, God willing, come Monday, letting you in on where you can go get vaccinated from Monday into the new week. So tune in on Monday morning for the morning update, and we will furnish you with that information. But in the meantime, I think what's most critical is if you've not gotten your first jab and you're interested in getting vaccinated, to go and get pre-registered. It gives the health officials a good picture, a clear picture of how many doses to carry to each community when they are going to do the administration. So they know that there are 70 people in a particular community, a particular district, who have indicated their interest, so they will carry the requisite number of doses into that community so that they don't run out with you standing on a line hoping to get vaccinated. So do that, and when you do come in, bring with you your identification card, and if you're getting your second dose, bring the immunization card that you were furnished with in the initial instance.
So just very quickly, on Monday morning, that's the 17th of May, you can go to the Suffolk Hospital grounds as well as the VG Sports Complex in order for you to get a vaccination. And the sites are opening from 9 a.m. and they run until 4 p.m. And as Jesse indicated there, on Monday morning, she'll be able to give you the rest of the vaccination sites. But for now, you know that prepare yourself so that you can go out to either the Suffolk Hospital grounds or the VG Sports Complex for vaccination come Monday morning.
Yeah, and as the Prime Minister indicated, and I think it can't be emphasized enough, vaccination is the key to St. Lucia and the wider Caribbean getting back to some degree of normalcy. Tourism being our lifeblood, we're beginning to see indications in the cruise sector, preparations being made, plans being made for a resuscitation of that sector in our part of the world. And so for that to be able to happen flawlessly, the plan is, the hook is herd immunity, at least 70% according to the health officials here on island, for us to be able to move about here internally as well.
And we to be able to have all the businesses open and continue to operate. But there's a deeper thing to it as well, because yes, that's on the economic end of things, but on the personal end, we want to be able to socialize, we want to be able to go about and move around as freely as we were doing before COVID-19, but also importantly, we need to be vaccinated, because like it or not, in order for us to take a plane, go to the US, go to Europe, Canada, wherever it is, you need to get that vaccination done. Whether you want to go for business, you want to go for leisure, or you want to go study, it has now become an imperative. So we don't want to say that it's mandatory, but it is imperative that you are vaccinated in order for you to now just resume all aspects of your life.
Absolutely. And also taking into consideration, well, you know, the US has now been moving to, once you're vaxxed, you don't have to wear your mask. And so we heard from the Prime Minister that there will be a review of, you know, the protocols, discussions as to how persons who are fully vaccinated can begin to maneuver St. Lucia. But you can only do that, and I've heard that discussion happening, Jesse, but you can only do that, and especially in our case where we do not have as many people vaccinated, yes.
Right? Because so yes, people coming in who are vaccinated may feel that they are vaccinated and they should move around freely.
We're still a vulnerable population.
But we are still vulnerable. So it doesn't matter that they've had their vaccines, but we are still vulnerable, given the fact that the scientists can't conclusively say that vaccinated people are not able to transmit the virus to people, let alone those who are unvaccinated.
So point blank period, vaccination is key.
Absolutely. Imperative to get on with all aspects of your life.
Absolutely.
But I just have one quick notice, Jesse, before we close, and that's coming from the C.O. Williams Construction Limited, advising motorists and the public that the scheduled maintenance work. I know that for those of you who travel along that carriageway there this morning would have encountered that. The section of the Castries Grocery Highway between Sanders Halcyon and the Villa Beach Cottages. So northbound traffic is being reduced to a single lane. That began from 9 a.m. thereabouts, and that's going to continue until 4 p.m. and they are going to resume that again come Sunday morning. So be careful when you're traveling along that section of the road there at 9 a.m. on Sunday. We know that sometimes turning that corner, you believe that road is clear, and then you hitting a bump there in the road. So please be careful and observe all of the traffic signs and signage.
Absolutely. And I think people have been by and large cooperating in terms of the work that has been ongoing on the John Compton Highway further north as well. And we can actually see the progress that is happening bit by bit, you know, the portions of land being taken in for the roundabouts and so on. We're beginning to see what the dream was.
Yes, we're beginning to see that take shape and begin to understand what that concept is, because a lot of people are like, what are they going to do there? But now we understand what the concept, we're beginning to see that come through. And you know what, Jesse?
Talk to me.
That by the time this is done, I give it perhaps 1 month after completion, no one will remember what it looks like before.
It happens because you see pictures and images from 20 years ago and you're like, oh yes, that happened.
Right. Yeah, that happened.
Anyway, we'd like to thank you so much for watching the Week in Review, the weekend wrap-up. We're looking back at the week that was. Quite a bit happened. We saw Lucia stepping in to provide some much needed equipment, expensive equipment, to the Ezolong laboratory. Also, we got our second batch of vaccines from the COVAX facility, and quite a few more developments. Yep, the Youth Empowerment Project coming through with their second program within weeks. The parenting program first, and now a program attending to the creative juices of our young people in the various communities.
But also importantly, Jesse, we did hear from the Department of Economic Development Development.
Yes.
Where through the SLDB, St. Lucia Development Bank, you have a portion of the climate adaptation for facility funding, right? That, a portion of that loan being repurposed in order to benefit the small business sector. So persons with small businesses affected by COVID can now go into the St. Lucia Development Bank and have a discussion there to be able to access funding to help them recover.
Absolutely. And going back to even the issues and answers interview I did earlier this week with Nahum Jean-Baptiste out of the implementation unit of the performance-based financing program. We know that St. Lucia is beginning to slowly make its way toward universal health care, national health insurance, essential package of health services with this pilot program, which will be starting in July. So we encourage everyone in the various communities to be cooperative as this program begins its rollout in pilot phase. So I guess that's all for now. I'd like to thank you so much for watching. Quite an interesting, in-depth conversation, interview that we had with the Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chastney, this morning. If you're just joining, so sorry, but you could always review, thankfully, thanks to social media. You could go back and watch the interview in its entirety to listen in on the extent of that conversation. I'd like to thank you so much for watching. Do enjoy.
We also want to thank DBS Television for joining us as well.
Right. Yes, DBS for also joining with the stream and being able to provide their own viewers as well with this important interview as the Prime Minister returns from mission in Miami.
Who remains in quarantine?
In quarantine at present. Do keep safe. Enjoy the rest of your weekend until we meet on Monday, God willing. Keep safe. Adhere to the protocols. They continue to remain in effect. We are in a state of emergency. We're coming into the week where the state of emergency would have lapsed, but we have the state of emergency being extended for an additional 5 months into October 16th. So continue to be cognizant of that, continue to be aware, continue to have your wits about you, observing the 6-foot distance, using copious amounts of hand sanitizer when you don't have a faucet around to wash with soap and water, and also please wear your mask. Please wear your mask until advised otherwise by the Ministry of Health.
And only listen to the official sources for your information.
Absolutely. I know sometimes the conspiracy theorists can be tempting, but please listen to the authorities for that. And the place you can get it is here on NTN. So it's all the time we have for now. Do enjoy on behalf of Lissa, myself, Jesse,
and Roger,
who's here on a Saturday with us. Keep safe. Goodbye. Cheers.